Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us. Could I please request everyone to put your mobile phones on silent mode? The title of the session today is Economy of Tomorrow Towards Pakistan as a Good Society. The moderator for the session is Abdul Qadir. Abdul Qadir is currently working as program coordinator and advisor at FES Pakistan. He has extensive experience of initiating innovative programs in the fields of politics and society, including policy reforms, dialogue in Pakistan. I invite Abdul Qadir to start the session.
So it's my duty to invite the panelists, Dr. Kaisar Bengali, Dr. Waqar, and Rolf. It's all right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today in this session, and thank you for the organizer of the Literature Festival to include this topic and to invite me as moderator of this session. The session that we are in this session, we are going to talk about economy and society, or rather, I would say society and economy. There's a difference. In this session, we would like to emphasize that economy is not only necessary but bricks and mortars of the society. And if you consider societies, one of the supreme narrative, supreme vision for the society is to establish good societies. And if economy is that important for the society, then the natural question would be, or the first elementary question would be, what kind of economy do we develop? And that's the question that we are going to discuss here. We are going to emphasize that for that foundation of a good economy, or without the foundation of good economy, the supreme or the vision or the narrative or the ideas of establishing good society is incomprehensible. And that is what our discussion would be around. We have seen that prevalent economic system, prevalent economic designs and models treat people as consumers, treat workers as commodities and factors of production, treat societies as markets, and treat ecology, our environment, as the raw material for the vested interest of business, for extraction of profits, for accumulation of wealth and power. If you have that system, certainly the society that will emerge is not a good society. It is also portrayed that economic system are fixed system, non-mutable system. They are writing on stones. But that's not true. We all know there are multiple systems of economy to manage the economy, to design the economy. And well, it is natural that economic sciences are not natural. They are invented by human beings, human societies. So there has to be alternative. And what are those alternatives that put the welfare of citizens, welfare of people, welfare of societies as the primary and ultimate goal of the society? And these are the alternatives that we are going to discuss, and these are the alternatives that are somehow described in the pretext of this title, Economy of Tomorrow, and its contribution for establishing good society. It's my pleasant duty to introduce the panel. I think I would not go into the panel, I will just describe them. Their names will be already coming into the screen, and their biodata is also there. Dr. Kaisar Bengali does not need any introduction. He is a pro-poor analyst on economic issues. He has been associated with many institutions. One of the most important contribution as an expert that he has contributed is that he has headed the Benazir Income Support Program, and one of the unique program that has actually survived 2 successive governments. Dr. Waqar is from STPI. He's a joint director there, and a very important activist in Pakistan who has been advisor to the government institution like Planning Commission, and he has been working in the international institution, and he's been active for the economic and advocacy for the sustainable society. Rolf, I think I'm going to write, Rolf is also mentioned here. Rolf is currently heading the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, FES. He would like to also inform us about FES. Rolf has been a journalist and has been working on in different parts of the world. So he's seen a lot of parts of the world. So I would ask already from Rolf this question for our conceptual clarity. What do you think is a good society? How would you broad brush the concept of good society?
Thank you very much. First, let me say it's an honor to be here at the festival, and it's also a compliment to the organizers that they think out of the box, putting economic and other issues which look like specialty issues but which shouldn't be such to this literature festival. We are all dealing with narratives in economy and in fiction, so I think it's a fitting match. The term good society, it originally came from a book in America in the 90s. It was later adopted by the German Social Democrats. But here for Pakistan, I think it makes you sense to use it in a way to reflect, to imagine. One of the writers here 2 days ago said Pakistan is insufficiently imagined country, and I think that applies to its economic base as well. And I think the term good society is just to make people reflect, imagine, is that the society they want to live in? Is it the society, your leader of the Senate last week published a book called Invisible People. So, the society with 80% of its population can be called invisible people. Is that a good society or not? And what policies, what politics does it take to actually turn Pakistan into a good society? So that's why we thought it would be apt to include this term here in the title.
Thank you. And I think the next immediate question would be that how economy would fit in for building up good society or societies, and then what kind of economy are we talking about? We come to the latter, but how does the whole concept of economy come into the being of society?
Well, the economy, you said it before, is a building block, an important building block to any good society. And for that reason, SDPI and FES, the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, which is a German political foundation, has been working here in the country for 30 years. We gathered a group of economists, opinion makers, so also people from other walks of life, to look at the economy and to imagine what could be different, to imagine different development paths, to imagine different narratives, different discourses. So this group was supposed to look beyond growth figures and inflation rates. And later in the discussion, I think Kaiser Bengali will break down some of these rates and figures for what they really are. So we established this group, and we're just hoping that this group can make a contribution in three ways. One is to analyze, as I said before, and to describe alternative paths to development other than those based on neoliberal economics. And secondly, to create a discourse, not a dialogue of the deaf, as it has been practiced a lot. So if alternative economists criticize the Minister of Finance, he tells them they're doing a disservice to the country. That's not a dialogue from what I understand it should be. So this group of economists, we call the project Economy of Tomorrow, should analyze the economy in its current state, also provincial economies, which are totally under-researched. It should facilitate a discourse, and it should look for new platforms. And one of the platforms is here at this literature festival, to actually speak in a way that normal people and non-economists actually understand what it is about. And I said before, this is a place where people who are experts in narratives are meeting, so we thought this would be an apt platform to present this economy of tomorrow, but also to listen to others who are these experts on narratives. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Bengali, what I heard from Rolf, that economy, like we say about wars, that too important a subject to be left alone on economists. But still, I'm going to ask you, first, in the international context, what kind of economy are we practicing today? What kind of different modes of economy do we have?
Thank you.
That's right.
Yeah. Thank you. You very rightly said economics is too important a subject to be left to economists. You know, if I'm just an economist, and if I get a contract from a government or somebody else, how can we kill 100,000 people with the least use of bullets so that we can save on costs? As an economist, I will do it, because that's my terms of reference of my contract. But where my conscience comes in, then I am not being an economist, I am being a human being. There are some things that I will do and some things that I will not do. So very rightly said, economists is too important to be left just to economists. And those who say that a technocratic government can heal Pakistan's issues are completely mistaken, because technocrats are like those economists who will prepare a very efficient program. Your question was about a system.
Yeah. What's wrong the economy of today? For
Yeah. There are two basic economic models, capitalism and socialism. All the rest would fit in either one or the other. What we have seen is capitalism in the last quarter of a century morph into what is known as neoliberalism. And socialism has developed into a more democratic form, which is called social democracy. Neoliberal economics says the market is everything. Everything the market will decide. In fact, there is no need for the state. So for social democracy, the state is important. For neoliberals, profit is their god. For social democracy, people is the objective to serve. If there are 8 pieces of bread, rotis, and 10 people, under a neoliberal regime, one of them who has the rotis will say, I will have my 4 rotis, and the rest of the 9 people can figure out how the rest of the 4 rotis are going to be divided. Under social democracy or under socialism, 8 rotis, 10 people, they will say, okay, let us, how can we divide it so that everybody has a piece? So, while neoliberalism, the basis of neoliberalism is personal greed, the basis of social democracy is sharing. Whatever we have, everybody shares. You frequently see corporations, when they are not making enough profits, they lay off labor. So labor is a commodity which is used for production and discarded when not needed. But for social democracy, labor, job security is the objective of economic policy. The market responds to purchasing power. They don't respond to need. Those who have purchasing power, the market will serve them. Those who don't have purchasing power can pray to Allah. And that is what the dispossessed are doing here.
Yeah. So, if we come back to come to Pakistan's question, so let's try to have some introspection. How many rotis we have and how many hungry tummies we have. If you like to elaborate that, maybe that requires a little bit more time of you. But how this the major social challenges in Pakistan that you see, and what are their implications for the society?
The real problem is not essentially economics, because economics is like a tool. You make a policy, but what goes behind making a policy is what is important. We have created an apartheid economy and an apartheid society. Those of us who understand what apartheid means. There are two Pakistans. There's a Pakistan of the elite, the Ashrafia, and a Pakistan of the people, the Awam. They live completely differently, just as South Africa did during the apartheid days. There are housing areas which are for the rich, which are very different. Palatial houses, where even the servant quarters are better than the houses of many millions who are the other side, the Awam. The statistics show that in defense society, we have 2.5 rooms per person, whereas in Lyari, the average is 9 persons to a room. This is the disparity, the two Pakistans that we have. Let us look at public transport. In the Ashrafia, the houses, 2 cars are a norm now, even 3. How do the Awam, the people, travel? On top of buses, hanging out. Only 2 days ago, 4 students of Urdu University lost their lives traveling in a bus. These accidents happen all the time. It's just that this one got more publicity. Education defines apartheid. The rich send their children to elite schools, where the tuition fee per child is 3 times the salary of the chowkidar of the same school. And the poor go to Urdu medium schools or madrasas or none at all. And the quality of education there is also obvious to everybody. The same with health. The elite health centers have opened up all over the country in the big cities. There is even one hospital in UK has an office in Islamabad. If you want to go there for treatment, you don't have to write to Islamabad. You can actually book your doctor and your room and everything from Islamabad. But there are people who die outside on the gates of the hospital without receiving treatment. So we have created two Pakistans. The Pakistan of the elite, the Ashrafia, and Pakistan of the Awam. We can go on and on. There are thousands, there are landlords with thousands of acres of land, and there are people who can't afford to bury their dead. 2 years back, about 1,000 people died from heat stroke. Nearly 400 bodies were never claimed. They were never claimed because their relatives couldn't afford the burial. Because land in a graveyard costs money, it's not free. इतने प्यारों को दफन भी करने के लिए पैसे नहीं होते, और 90 एकड़ ज़मीन वैसे ही तोहफे में दे देते रिटायरमेंट के वक्त. There are families that hop over to Dubai for a day to do shopping and come back. My own friends' wives frequently do that. They go in the morning, rent a car from the airport, do some shopping, eat, have lunch at a 5-star restaurant, come back in the evening with 100,000 rupees worth of shopping or something. And there is now a phenomena of middle class poverty. I have two personal examples. We had an office in Islamabad, and our manager, talking on the phone with his wife, suddenly fell silent, and I asked what happened. She said, there's some guests at home, bring something when you come back, and I don't have any money. I had a secretary who didn't come on a very important day, and I asked her the next day, why didn't you come? She had tears in her eyes. She said, I was dressed, but I didn't have money for transport. These are people who earn 25 to 30,000 rupees, and yet they suffer poverty during the last week. You can see queues at Zamzama restaurants waiting for a table, but go to a middle class, low middle class restaurant after midnight, there is also a queue for those waiting for leftover food. There is a Zamzama, there is a cigar bar. You can smoke Havana cigars for those who can afford it. But I've seen a place in Balochistan, in Kharan district, there was a chakki for atta chakki, flour mill. And there was a lot of cactus outside, cut and piled up. So I said, what is cactus doing here? He said, we mix it with wheat so that wheat becomes cheaper and people can afford it. So we have created these two Pakistans. And the market says, of course, the private sector will deal with everything. But in Pakistan, the private sector is very weak and continues to be weak. When the state withdrew under pressure from World Bank and IMF in the early 80s, the market did not take its place. There was a vacuum. This vacuum has been filled by the masjid and the madrasa. And that's where we face terrorism today.
Yeah, and I think this is already set out the example, set out the way of analyzing the issues, that what can be good cannot be answered before we analyze what is wrong. Dr. Bengali, if you could briefly, or you have already mentioned, so the poverty is not only income inequality or income deficit. It can be in health, it can be education, in access to the public services. So in terms of number or in terms of inequality, how large is this number in Pakistan, you would like to say, that with these so many dimensions of poverty or deprivation, how large is the number for the country of this size?
No, you're very right. We should not measure poverty only in terms of numbers, although numbers do tell a story, and in Pakistan numbers tell a very stark story. In fact, this is an apartheid society, we have privatized higher education completely. In fact, all parts of education. So those who can afford can go to elite schools, pay 100,000 rupees a year as tuition. Those who can't go to state schools which are disintegrating. But when they graduate, when whoever spends 100,000 rupees a year or a semester, they obviously want their return. And that return will come in the corporate sector in banks. So the only thing I would want to study is have an MBA or an IT degree, because that's where I'll find jobs. I will not go and study mathematics or science or physics, because I will be employed in a university at 1/3 the salary I would get in a bank. So what is happening is that there is no center of excellence in mathematics. There is no center of excellence in science. Mathematics is the mother of all sciences. If you don't have mathematics, you can't have science. If you don't have science, you don't have technology. That is why we are not producing anything. All of us, those who are working, those who are students, on our table, everything is imported. Even the stapler machine is imported and the pin is imported. We don't make it. We can't make it. And for 70 years, we have only exported 3 chays. Chawal, chamra and chadar. Textiles, leather and rice. We don't make anything else because we don't know how to make anything. We are technically ignorant people, because this is what neoliberalism does. All we have is MBAs. And we have so many MBAs that they are willing to accept any job. My grade 16 personal secretary in Quetta when I was in the government of Balochistan had an MBA. Now, about numbers, they are very stark. Inequality exists at various levels: interpersonal, inter-regional, intra-regional, that is within the provinces, intergenerational, gender inequality. These are various levels of inequality, and the state has promoted them by policy. If you look at the structure of the economy today, for every 100 rupees of national income that is created, 37 rupees goes to the richest 10% of the population, and 3 rupees goes to the poorest 10% of the population. So the more GDP growth we have, the more inequality we are creating, because that's built into the structure of the economy. If you look at the tax structure, all taxes put together, the rich, the 10% rich, pay 12% of their income in taxes. But the poor, 10% poorest section of the population, pay 16% of their income in taxes. So this is a state which actually takes from the poor to service the rich. And in last 15 years, we have abolished wealth tax. The rich don't need to pay tax for their wealth. It has been abolished, actually. If you look at regional inequality, Balochistan is abjectly poor and continues to be poor. There are 7 studies of inter-district ranking of districts by poverty and underdevelopment. In one 1982 study listed 10 districts of Pakistan at the bottom. 9 of them were in Balochistan. Another study in 1990 listed 20 districts which were at the bottom. 14 of them were in Balochistan. 1996, 30 districts which are at the bottom. 24 are in Balochistan. The number of districts are increasing because we have been increasing the number of districts. 72% of the rural population of Balochistan is below the poverty line. Almost 3/4. So this is the state of affairs. The more development we have, the more poverty, the more inequality we will be spreading. And this regional inequality is such that it only benefits metropolitan areas like Lahore division and Karachi division and Islamabad. And you don't see any development, definitely not in Balochistan. An example of intergenerational inequality, only 2 days ago, there was a report in the newspaper that Pakistan has signed a $600 million loan with China to help us build up our reserves, foreign exchange reserves. Now, the finance minister constantly praises himself for building very good reserves. But these are reserves built on loans. So what does it mean? ये हुकूमत तो तालियां बजवा लेगी कि रिजर्व्स बहुत अच्छे हैं, लेकिन आने वाली जनरेशन को इसकी कीमत अदा करनी पड़ेगी. They will have to pay the price of today's applause which the government will get. I've just edited a book on development and gender, and several chapters in it, and they all show how development policy is structured that discriminates against women. One classic example in Karachi, the Liari Expressway. Millions of people were evicted to build that expressway. They have all been resettled far end of Karachi, where there is no public transport. And one very telling comment I got from 2 or 3 households over there, of all the problems they face of being thrown outside the city, they said our daughters can't get married because who will come to this far end to see हमारी बेटियों को कौन देखने आएगा, हमारी बेटियों की शादी नहीं हो रही है यहाँ पर. You know, but development planners don't take these things into account. They don't think people are human beings. They think they are units which can be pushed from one end to the other. When a factory fire takes place, 300 people die. That's production inputs. Sweep them aside, get new workers. So we have to change this attitude. We have to think of development in terms of people,
And
not in terms of profits.
And these new thinking, and that's, I think, when we start talking about this new thinking, I think we are hinting towards some solutions. So far, I think we have enough laid the ground what are the situation of the economy of today and how it implicates on the society, and what kind of society that it creates, because these are the results of the certain economic policy. So we cannot discuss in just the next 10 or 15 minutes about what are the solutions, but if you can just point out the direction, that what kind of direction the economic policy should start taking. And there we also ask our colleague Dr. Waqar to follow you, that how he would like to also see these results. So maybe again, as a last question to you, what kind of direction the economy should start taking?
I think we have to first decide what kind of society do we want to build. Do we want to build a society on justice? Or do we want to continue with this society which is completely built on injustice? There are 4 elements which God created before He created us. Created land, air, water and sunshine. Without these 4 elements, we can't survive. There will be no earth, no universe. So one thing we have to decide is that these 4 elements are public property, they cannot be private property. You can't say, I can't breathe, I can only breathe if I pay for 20 inhalations a minute. And if I pay more, I can have 30 inhalations per minute. You can't do that. You can't do that with sunshine. But we are doing that with water. And we are doing that extensively with land. When people encroach, build their huts on a land, after 10 years or so, a bulldozer comes and throws them out because this is illegal occupation of land. Where will they go? Where will human beings go? They can't fly in the air. They can't build their nests on trees. It is the responsibility of the state, not the market, to make sure that everybody has housing. So that's where the budget should go. And housing includes potable water. The children will not fall sick by drinking that water, people will not fall sick. It includes other basic facilities. That's the definition of housing. In budgetary terms, we have to ensure that 50% of the budget goes to direct services to the people. That is housing, public transport, water supply, education and health. 50% of the budget has to go. If you need a constitutional amendment for it, we should have a constitutional amendment for it. A state that does not provide jobs, livelihoods to its people, a state which cannot provide education to the children, a state that does not provide health care to its population has no raison d'etre to exist.
Thank you very much. We just, it looks like that you describe the problem and Dr. Waqar has to solve them. I will not burden Dr. Waqar like this, but it probably, unfortunately, that might be an impression. But Dr. Waqar, we live also, we have discussed Pakistan in a more detailed way, but Pakistan's economy, and every economy is now part of the international system. We are internationalized. We are part of the globalization drive. And of course, our own industry or our own enterprises, they are facing the problem of non-competitiveness. And this is a huge challenge. What should they do? What should they be able to produce and sell out? Would you like to briefly that what is the picture of our trade in the country? I mean, what is the situation there? What are the reasons of this incompetitiveness, and what can we do?
Thank you very much. So these are actually two questions. You know?
Yeah.
So I'll probably take the later one first. As Dr. Bengali rightly said, one of the key issues is, of course, the lack of decent work, the lack of productive employment in the society, you know. And to that is linked that point that if state or the current private sector is unable to provide jobs, one has to provide avenues for self-employment then. One has to provide that kind of enabling environment in the society that people can find work for themselves, basically. So we have a lot of interest in youth and women entrepreneurship, self-employment, that is to say. And we look at micro and small, medium enterprises and their competitiveness, or how to make them more competitiveness, so to say, you know. And therein, I think, the key issue which Dr. Bengali was also discussing, the inequality of opportunity is something which is hurting over there. So it's not that we don't have enterprising youth. You have a lot of enterprising youth, but it's just that even within the existing youth cohort, some of them may have greater opportunities and some of them may have lesser opportunities, you know. So how do you bring them at fore, you know? We recently conducted a study and we found there are 4 main areas which are sort of making this inequality of opportunity more acute. The first one, when it comes to your youth-led small and medium enterprises, is your taxation structure. It has gone so regressive now that a new SME during its first year has to face 55 taxes and levies. That's just in 1 year. 55 taxes, you know. So what this means is that if a person like me cannot open an enterprise, I would rather stay in the informal segment of the economy, which has its own implications because it's not covered under social protection, you know. The second core issue, of course, is that the permits to start a business. And just to cite a few examples, and maybe just one due to paucity of time, you want to start a construction business, you want to start a micro enterprise, you need 26 different permits. These are federal, provincial, and municipal permits and licenses, you know. That's the second reason, of course. And then third, of course, is access to your infrastructure. You go out to get the necessary electricity and gas connections, and you readily face an environment of rent seeking, basically, where you realize that I may not be a contender who would be able to get a connection maybe in 1 month, 2 months, a year, 2 years. You never know. Of course, it depends on how much you can grease. And the fourth is access to new technology. The very fact that a lot of people in, for example, textile sector, in the SME sector will tell you that they haven't upgraded their basic technology for the past decade and a half, you know. They didn't have that kind of working capital to add to the capacity. Now, if you take these 3 or 4 issues which the business is facing and then come to what Dr. Bengali was talking about, is policy helping to mitigate these issues? The policy sadly has become more complex during the past 5 years if I talk about. So before 2010, you had one FBR, Federal Board of Revenue. As a good taxpayer, you would file one return. Now you have 3 different revenue authorities in the provinces, plus one FBR. FBR doesn't want to let go of its authority. It should, ideally. So now, if you have business in, for example, Punjab, you will file a return with FBR. You will also file 3 returns with the Provincial Revenue Authority. This is 4 returns. If you have business in another province, you have business in 2 provinces, the number of your returns increases. It becomes 8. Now, the enterprises that we are talking about do not have the capacity to hire those expensive accountants for these sorts of tax returns, you know. And our policy, our fiscal policy, has made life sort of difficult to them. And I think the third aspect that I wanted to add over here is that the promised judicial reform, which is critical for business level dispute resolution, has been missing for ages. You tried it in the past 2 decades, 3 different programs to reform the business side, the commercial cases, the commercial court cases. You haven't been able to do it.
Thank you. We just have 15 minutes, and I think we utilize with audience and some of the questions from the audience. Let me please help us, and the way would be that I collect maybe few questions from all sides of the hall, and then ask briefly our panelists to answer those questions. So may I start with the left or right?
खवातीन से शुरू करें.
Thank you. Very
Okay,
quick
you were
questions,
very
if I
close.
may.
Okay.
Dr. Bengali, you mentioned about the evils of capitalism, I agree. But don't forget, in China, the great leap forward, the collectivization of Mao killed, I think, over 20 million people. And that is why China is communist in name only, and they encourage free enterprise. In Germany, where you are from, sir, the icons of capitalism, such as Mercedes and Siemens, are there, BMW, but then they also have an excellent state educational system, and they also have wonderful worker rights. So I think it's a possibility to have a mixture, not just say, well, one is evil and one is very nice.
Thank you.
And another thing is that you spoke about Balochistan. What's the budget of Balochistan? In Larkana, they have billions of rupees in development, and where does the money go? So it's not so much as, oh, yeah, capitalism or socialism.
Thank you.
It's the fact that there's corruption, the fact that a small elite grabs all the power, and most of all, I agree with Ocar, too many departments, too many taxes, all of them like a hydra, octopus trying to grab on you.
Thank you very much. Now the lady's turn, because that should have been the first one. Yes, please. No, ladies first. This coming to you. Next is gentleman's term, so make up your mind. Yes, please. Short.
My question is to Dr. Kaisar Bengali. Kaisar Bengali, as I know him, he is one of the board of directors for one of the education foundation of Sindh. And I just wanted to know it promotes the education, it promotes education and literacy to public-private partnership model. I just want to know, but it's the public-private partnership model is so based on adhocism. I just want to know how, does he really think that it's going to bring some improvement in development sector, and how can we abolish this adhocism so that we can have this leverage from this model? And the second question is regarding the NFC award. Though it's been 2-3 months back that I noticed Kaisar Bengali meeting Dr. Ishaq Dar regarding NFC award. I just want to know the status of Sindh regarding NFC award.
Yes, please. Yourself. Please restrict to yourself one question, because yes, yourself. Back to the room. Yeah.
Shukriya. Just wanted to check. Yes, the story is, as you have said, but the issue is that why is the narrative so different? What is the political economy of not only reform, but of telling the story of a divided Pakistan, which makes it so difficult from making that the dominant narrative rather than the underdog? What is the, so in other words, what's the political economy of power that even does not allow us to challenge the dominant narrative?
Yeah, I think this is one of the, let's deal these three questions, one on the education NFC about the models, but I think this was related to this question as well, that while you have solutions or you may have ways of tackling these challenges that you describe, but the dominant may be few, but they are also politically very powerful and they are dominant people. How can this be made possible? So it's a kind of a political economy. What does it mean for the solution? Maybe Waqar, with you.
You see, I think I'll just be very brief because I understand that Dr. Bengali can give a more detailed response. I think what we need to understand is to go back to the very basics.
Mike.
Yes, to go back to the very basics of the way the democratic institutions are currently working, basically, and they should work for the people, So at the very top, you see, you need to have, when I look at the budgetary process, for example, you have a budgetary process which is led by what we call the National Economic Council process. On the side by side, you have some issues which aren't settled over there. You have a council of common interests that deals with them. Then, of course, the lady correctly pointed out the NFC process, And of course, there may be more at the province and sub-province level. The current issue is, and that will be only one point that I'll make, all these different processes which you have made, they're not currently talking to each other. The NFC proceedings, CCI proceedings, for example, even if you come below that, the budgetary approvals processes, ECNEC even, there are very different follow-up processes, and none of them is dovetailed to look at it. Please.
I think the issue is no longer a debate between capitalism and socialism. That issue died a very long time ago. Both have certain strengths. The debate now is between neoliberalism, which is an extreme form of capitalism. And I think there is a need to combine the two. And this combination comes in public-private partnership. When I was in Sindh government, and my secretary, I was advisor planning, and my secretary was the current head of the Sindh Education Foundation. We pursued among other things, we pursued two things. One, we constructed a Hyderabad-Birpur Khas highway. It's been constructed by a private company, 4-lane international standard, and this private company provided 2/3 of the funds, equity, and 1/3 of the amount was given as a loan by the Sindh government to this company. So the Sindh government has not a rupee invested in this, and we have this highway, it's functioning now. And it owns this highway for 30 years, and for 30 years the government of Sindh does not have to spend a single rupee on repair and maintenance of this highway. This is one very successful example of a public-private partnership here. The other is, there was a abandoned boarding school in Gadap. We managed to rehabilitate it, 90 rooms, 2 kids per room, 180 students, and we gave it to an NGO to run it on a management contract. And this again is successfully running. So one is an example of infrastructure where there is public-private partnership. The other is a social sector institution and the public-private partnership. And I think this is a model that we can adopt and benefit from both, because private sector don't take risk. Private sector respond to purchasing power, not to need. But the government can take risks and the government can respond to need. So when you combine the two, you have the best of both worlds in a sense. Political economy of power, Those who are rich call the shots. They will make sure that these institutions that Dr. Waqar talked about will not talk to each other, because it's not necessary for them to talk to each other. Their decisions are made outside constitutional and legal and legislative forums.
So what to do about that? If you want to suggest, because that's the difficult
The
part of it.
The unfortunate part is that Pakistan's elite is completely insensitive to the plight of the country. We live in different worlds. They don't. I have friends, children, living in, say, defense, and they have never crossed Clifton Bridge. They are not allowed to cross. They only live in their own area. They don't know what the other side of the city looks like. And I think the rich, the elite, almost 80% of them have foreign passports, or their children have living abroad. And the only thing that the rich are worried about in this country is how to get to the airport when crisis happens. You know, they're not worried about anything else. Kids are falling in open manholes and dying every day. Schools are rotten. Government hospitals are rotten. Public transport doesn't exist. But it doesn't bother anybody. And I think what needs to be done is for the elite of this country to really realize that they have a responsibility to the state. Our elite is like, you know, they're first-class passengers on a ship, and they're pulling out nuts and bolts from the ship to strengthen their cabins, and they forget that when the ship sinks, the cabin will sink too.
I'll take two questions. Sorry, we have time for... Excuse me, Rehan Shah. Excuse me, Rehan Shah. Ignore him. जी, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'll pick two questions from front, and we don't have time, sorry. And one, the lady, could you please sit down, sir? The lady, yes, please. So may I ask for you and then your question? Please wait, and your question, please. Excuse me, just a minute. Your question will be next.
Next.
ब्रीफली जी, मेरा नाम इम्तियाज़ रस्तगार है और मैं इस्लामाबाद से आया हूँ। तो आपने BISP का जिक्र किया, BISP का आपने जिक्र किया, और लेकिन दूसरी साइड पे सिविल सोसाइटी क्या कर रही है कि वहाँ अखुवत का मॉडल है, जहाँ लेने वाला देने वाला बन जाता है, और ऐसे और काफ़ी इनिशिएटिव ऐसे हैं. हाउ डू यू लुक एट BISP एज कंपेयर टू अखुवत?
Yes, please, your question. No, the lady sitting there with blue shirt. Yeah.
My question.
Yeah.
My question is on the figures you quoted on Balochistan. The governments have not utilized their funds for education and road. I work with an NGO that works in Balochistan, and that issue has not been addressed, nor have their leaders taken ownership of their province. Ownership of province has been taken in the frontier, it has been taken in the Punjab, it hasn't been taken in Sindh or Balochistan. Secondly, when you talked about maths and physics lacking, that needs to start at the grassroots level. If it's not being taught to the students at the grassroots level, and they're not being encouraged to pursue it, they're obviously going to look at MBAs and nothing else. We need the mathematicians to take us further.
Thank you. Let's briefly answer them.
एक सवाल और ले ले, वो एक खातून है.
Okay. Maybe the ladies, yeah, please. Thank you.
I also work with an NGO. अभी आपने PPP की बात की, public-private partnerships की. We also work with that fund. मगर गवर्नमेंट में सबसे ज़्यादा प्रॉब्लम ये आ रही है कि अब वो जो पुराने प्लेयर्स हैं जिन्होंने कोई नहीं दिखाई है, कोई जो है ना आगे नहीं अच्छा काम किया, उन्हीं को दोबारा मिलता है, because the government is the one who is giving those contracts to them. How can we stop them? Or is there any way where we can actually inform the authorities that this is not right, or something like that? Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe Dr. Waqar and Dr. Bengali, starting with Dr. Waqar, and in the end I'll come back to Rolf as well. Dr. Waqar, if we if you can just get the sense of this question and try to reply, and since the budgets is a very important policy measures, maybe you also like to recommend some very important or three most important suggestions, and the same would be my question to Dr. Bengali.
Thank you very much. I think the discussion on public-private partnership was very important, and one of the things that we have been suggesting is to look at how models of PPP can be developed in China-Pakistan Economic Corridor Initiative. So instead of our government's public sector enterprises, which may not be that efficient to partner with the Chinese, let those pockets of successful private sector of Pakistan partner with China, especially the SMEs of Pakistan partner with China under CPEC, So, and that can of course be facilitated at the G2G level. The second is to also look at our ways of sort of honoring or letting the private sector know how are they being facilitated. Now, the next will be the election year, and what you will see is populist politics. You've already started seeing it in the form of textile package, a separate package for farmers, for example, and this probably is not the right model to go forward. You can't have a one-off Kisan package or a one-off textile package. You have to look at the overall policy and then reimagine it for inclusiveness and participation, And I think the third is probably, as you rightly said, Budget 2017-18 will be an opportunity for this government if they want to sort of improve upon or correct their legacy, And I think one of the three things that they could do probably, you talked about maybe two or three things, but I think the most important thing is correct the institutions of economic governance, And it is in their hands, And as I said, currently...
And correction means that is it democratic control that you are emphasizing?
So essentially, by the end of 2015, we had promised to ourselves that we will wrap up the process of new institutions which had to come up as a result of 18th Amendment, new institutions of economic governance. That still hasn't happened. So for example, you have a National Tax Commission report lying pending, of course, which suggests that there should be an interprovincial working group on taxation to thrash out federal provincial issues on taxes, for example. That working group is still not there, and one would like to see it in this year's budget. Just on poverty, and the easiest thing that you can do to sort of mitigate some level of poverty in this budget is to do away with over 50 withholding taxes that you have in this country. The poor people cannot get adjustment of withholding taxes in their tax returns. This is the highest amount of withholding taxes, starting from your mobile phone card to anything that you purchase of a consumer good, So I think a rationalization of your withholding regime should be a key recommendation.
Thank you. Dr. Bengali?
Well, I think we're running out of time, so I'll basically respond to one question which has arisen earlier also, is why is Sindh and Balochistan not able to do this? Now it is up to the provinces to do it, correct? And when I was in Sindh government and then in Balochistan government, that is what I have been struggling to establish. There is somebody living in a slum, a jhuggi, doing manual labor on the streets. Suddenly you go and give him 500,000 rupees and he says, now you don't need to do that, start your own business. He won't be able to do it. 7th NFC gave a lot of money to the provinces, but there are no institutional structures within the provinces. They have never been developed in the last 70 years, and there was no way this money, they didn't know how to use this money. So obviously there was wastage. Also, we have a very colonial structure in this country. We are federation only in name, even after the 18th Amendment. I give you an example from Balochistan. The way civil service rules are structured, provincial civil service officers never reach the top. In the whole province of Balochistan, there is not a single Balochistan civil service officer above the rank of SP. The entire police leadership is from outside of Balochistan. And I know this since I've spent 3 years as economic advisor to Balochistan Chief Minister. When the chief minister gives an order and the police hierarchy does not want to follow it, the chief minister can't do anything. So before we blame provinces for not doing enough with all the money that has been given to them, you have to build institutions and structures to be able to use this money. Yes, the Sardars may be to blame for many of these things, but for 70 years this state has supported, built and fattened the Sardars for their own use. And you can't say just by the 18th amendment the Sardars will just disappear, go away. They are not going to go away. So, and the same with Vaderas in Sindh or Chaudhries in Punjab or anywhere else. Things don't happen overnight. The state has promoted these Vaderas and Sardars and Chaudhries and Khans, and they continue to promote them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the last remark, maybe we can hear you, but probably will not be able to answer. But just if you can in just 20 seconds, huh? Yes, please. If you can speak loudly. Okay, loudly. Use your voice.
मगर आप लोगों को जब ये भी पता नहीं है कि ग्वादर में पानी ही नहीं है, जो वहाँ के लोगों को चाहिए, वहाँ पे सर जनाजे को गुस्ल देने के लिए पानी नहीं है, और आप लोगों को ऐसा लगता है, आप लोग हमें ऐसा महसूस करवा रहे हैं कि आप लोगों को बलूचिस्तान चाहिए, बलोच को नहीं चाहिए।
Thank you.
बिल्कुल सही कहा। बलूचिस्तान में जो अखबार निकलते हैं उसमें अक्सर वहीं की खबर आती है, यहाँ तो बलूचिस्तान को कवर ही नहीं करता कोई। वहाँ डाके पड़ते हैं, ग्वादर में पानी ले जाते हैं घर में डाका डाल के, ये हालत है वहाँ पर।
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. You would probably realize by the end of this session that society, the way it's functioning now, Pakistani society or society elsewhere, is not good society, because there are a lot of bad economy, and good economy can play a role for building. It's not just a role, it's a foundational role for making it a good society. That is the idea of our project and our work on economy of tomorrow. We have made several publications which are available there. Just wanted to show you that these are Pakistan's case studies, that what kind of economy Pakistan need for building Pakistan a good society. I just end this session. I picked this book in the book stalls there. It is about बचपन की इब्तदा. I read about बेहतरीन इब्तदाई नशोनुमा और रोशन मुस्तकबिल की ज़मानत के लिए ग़ज़ाई ज़रूरियात, प्यार और तवज्जो, ज़माना हमल और एहतियात, खेल में सीखना, वालिद की अहमियत, महफूज माहौल, समाजी माहौल, सेहत और सफाई, ये वो तमाम आइटम्स हैं जो इकोनॉमी ऑफ टुमारो के टॉपिक्स हैं जिस पर इन किताबों में मटीरियल अवेलेबल। थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर योर पार्टिसिपेशन। थैंक यू।